Rose, and in this video I want to explore the many paths towards stuckness, towards not being able to move beyond the barrier. So we'll define the barrier, and the barrier, through all the various paths that lead to this barrier, the barrier is encountered. I encounter the barrier with fear, with the looking down of a 6-year-old child waiting to be hit, with a dread that is too big to face, with a rage at being stopped, with a violent reaction to being stopped, with a black depression, with cynical despair, with thoughts of suicide, with disregard for other people, with apathy. Who gives a damn? No matter what happens, I won't get past this barrier. Now, beyond the barrier is the transcendent. Beyond the barrier lies grace, lies the beautiful other, lies the one, lies the divine, lies something worth living for. Beyond the barrier, the call, the draw, is towards the beautiful other, towards heaven, towards something good, something true, something worth working for, worth sacrificing for. That's what creates the darkest feeling as I meet the impediment. So already we see the architecture of the full shape of human feeling, of human state. There must be something that we value, and in its antithesis, want to avoid. That's grace, that's beauty, that's truth and goodness. That's the mystical other, nirvana. We all want it. We all have a sense of it beyond language. We've all touched it in an orgasm, in a piece of food, in a beautiful view, in a piece of music, in a poem. We've all touched God, Goddess, the sense of the ineffable. And we want it. We can sense it. We all want it. We're drawn towards it. And we hit the barrier. And in the encounter of the barrier, grief, rage, despair, loneliness, every constrictive emotion, every constrictive state that we can imagine at its deepest level lies in the juxtaposition of the most beautiful, true, and good thing that we can imagine, that we can desire, that we can reach for, and it being withheld. The worst human states are generated by withholding divinity, by withholding beauty, truth, and goodness. And so, what is this block? What is this object made of that's so hard? Well, the root of all culture is cult. The root of every cult is a pattern, a self-referential pattern that resists change, that resists light, that resists information, that resists energy flow. The cult is that identity, that pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that turns inward on itself. I am this way because I was this way. And I was this way because that was the way to do things back then. And I will be this way because that's who I am. That's identity. When a group of people form a self-referential identity that resists change, resists flow, resists a relationship with the present time in favor of a relationship with the past, that's a self-referential identity at an individual level, a self-referential cult at a group level. Culture, you have the cult, the part that holds its own, that defends the tradition, and the flow, the movement, the change. Living cultures are constantly moving, are constantly changing. Cults, while holding their own identities, so you have a balance of masculine and feminine, yin and yang, black and white structure and chaos. You have a balance. If you let everything go too quickly without referencing anything, you lose all identity. You lose all coherence, all cohesion. You have the cult. The cult is the object that will not get out of the way, that will not move. This is who I am. I don't know myself. I'm not myself if I don't do this. Right? So, at a group level and at an individual level, the cult in culture, all the laws that stop good things from happening. I live in Marin County, and it is illegal to build a house that costs less than $650,000. Meaning if you follow every one of the more than 1,000 distinct laws necessary in order to legally build a house, it is impossible to build a house for less than $650,000. That structure of self-referential laws, we are a country of law. Therefore, we must follow the law. This is the law. We are a country of law. Therefore, we must follow the law. And that's the way it is. That's the wall that hits the increasing number of homeless people, which basic rationality says will never be able, even if they're fully employed at McDonald's, to buy a $650,000 home or pay the rent that makes leasing a $650,000 home profitable, break even. So that's the wall. That's the cult. We do it because we do it, and that's why we do it. And so we'll keep doing it because that's who we are. That is a block. So law is one aspect of the self-referential cult. Tradition is another aspect of the self-referential cult. We are this type of people. Nobody tells us what to do. We do whatever we want. We do this. We eat whatever we want. This is what we're doing, right? So the traditions in the cult, the value hierarchy within the cult is almost completely unquestioned. We all know that keeping busy is incredibly important. You keeping busy? You keeping busy? We all know that being rich is incredibly important. You see, there is a list of the Forbes 400, the 400 richest people in the world. It's a very important list. There isn't a list of the 400 best teachers in the world, because we all know that teachers are not as important as rich people, right? Or there would be a list for them. We would measure them. There's no list of the most competent parents in the world. There's no list of the kindest people in the world. And what makes a cult is it doesn't hold up to rationality in the present. Meaning, if you ask a scientist in the relevant field, a sociologist, an anthropologist, if you ask a psychologist, if you ask a scientist in the relevant field, if you just ask common people, do you think the world would be a better place if you got onto the Forbes 400 list, which means you've got to have billions of dollars? Do you think that the world would be better off if there was another billionaire? Or if you had to choose between better teachers in schools and another billionaire, and you wanted the best for the world. Here's another billionaire on the Forbes 400 list. Here's a higher quality of education. Well, are you free of your cult enough to understand the science that says the billionaire who goes from 200 million to 3 billion isn't any happier? There's no study that supports the data that going from 200 million to 3 billion increases any happiness at all for anyone. But there are studies that say that more people knowing how to read and write well, more people understanding the art of learning, the art of acquiring mentors, does bring happiness to all involved. That's the science. But where's the cult? Where's the cult measuring what actually matters? Measure what matters. An intelligent cult measures the things that create happiness. Those are not height. Those are not age. So we are obsessed with height and we're obsessed with age. After the $100,000 mark a year, it's not money. So what does bring happiness? Self-esteem. So where's the list of the 400 most competent people? You see, the cult-like nature of a culture doesn't ask these questions and doesn't respond. And the Forbes 400 list will keep coming out, spouting stuff that has nothing to do with anyone's well-being, except highly egotistical narcissists who think that they are worth more as a human being because their cult tells them that their ranking is important. In other words, the cult lies. The cult lies and says if you can become the richest person in the world, but why settle for number 10? Then you will be happy. So the unquestioned norms within the political, within the educational, within the relational, within the family system, within the health system, the unquestioned norms that are reinforced by law and by tradition to the detriment of everyone who lives by those laws, or at the very least, the majority. That's what this wall is, this barrier that blocks intelligence, that blocks life, that blocks the flow towards that which is beautiful, good, and true. Well, the most constrictive feeling that I have in my body is the helplessness of feeling complete and utter rage and talking to a wall, talking to a blind cult, a deaf cult, an insane cult, talking to a wall and not getting through. So, where does this come from? Where does this darkest feeling come from? Anger, rage, the capacity to fly off the handle, to lose it, to shut down in depression, to enter states of addiction because it's just too fucking crazy. It's so fucking crazy that even the curse words are inverted. Fuck. The best we've got. It's astounding that a cult would turn procreation and pleasure, the highest expression of the human experience, into a curse, along with shit, the fertilizer for all life. Dirty, the source for every plant on earth is dirt. What kind of a cult is founded on the idea of dissociation from and shame of the source of all life? Fucking, shitting, and dirt are the three foundations of every living thing on this planet. You take away sex, you take away the dirt, and you take away the shit, and this planet is dead in a matter of a few weeks. It's that simple. And yet that's what I'm given by this cult. If I want to express rage, if I want to express extraordinary pain, I'm asked to use the three greatest blessings of our entire planet by a cult that cringes at the thought of being dirty, of fucking, of saying the word, and of fertilizing that dirt with shit. It's astounding that that's what we think should be the most taboo things out of our mouth. Not stupidity, not incomprehensible ignorance, but the three foundations of all life on this planet. That's not a good start. Now, when I look at the dead ends that have brought me into the wall, well, the first wall was the family law, thou shalt not feel. Now, if you're born into a human body, and if you are born into a traumatic family system, thou wilt feel pain, that will feel the full range of human emotions. So what do you do when you charge a battery full of electricity and then pass a law condemning all batteries that are filled with electricity? What do you do with that situation? What do you do when you fill a child with emotion and then pass a family law that says thou shalt not feel? Thou shalt not cry. Thou shalt not talk truthfully about one's feelings. Thou shalt not show the feelings in one's body. This is insane. And it is the first wall. Which do you want? If you will stop traumatizing me, I will stop having uncontrollable feelings. If you keep traumatizing me and inducing these states, is it intelligent to punish a child for exhibiting the effects of the cause? If you floor the accelerator and then beat up the car for driving forward, is that intelligent, right? So that is a huge hammer back and forth. Feel more? don't express any feelings. Feel more, don't express any feelings. Feel more, don't express any feelings. Feel more, don't express any feelings. So this is obviously not going to feel very good. It's obviously going to produce a lot of pressure. It does, it did, and it will continue to produce pressure in every family system where infants are routinely traumatized and commanded to lie about it. To lie about it to create a mask on their body where their body doesn't show the feeling. To create synthetic language over the feeling. And to pretend that the events that produce the feelings didn't happen. Or to pretend that they produce mild, acceptable feelings, rather than outrage and hate. So this is the first wall. Now this blocks all trust, and it blocks a great deal of love, and it blocks a great deal of sanity, because in one's first relay of energy with the system, with the cult, represented by the family, there is insanity, cruelty, a lack of science, and an incredible pressure to lie. Don't cry. The tear ducts, the body, is designed to display the emotion and release it, to pass it through. So what do you do when you're not only told you can't feel, but one cannot pass the feeling through so that the feeling stays stuck in the body? Well, in my case, this leads to 4 decades of increasing chronic fatigue, exhaustion, frustration, anxiety. Well, what do you do when people say go to therapy, and none of the therapists are trained in trauma? When none of the therapists are traumatically literate, and when talk therapy doesn't work on trauma, what do you do then? And when you keep telling someone to go to therapy, and the therapy doesn't work, which weakens the patient, because when the patient takes time off work and drives to the therapist and pays money that wasn't made working to the therapist, and then takes time and gas and money to drive back away from the therapist to feel worse, that's giving the patient the disease of the therapist. It is incompetence. It is sociopathic. It is misleading. So what do you do when therapist after therapist gives this dis-ease to the patient, and ignorant cult member after ignorant cult member recommends therapy but isn't actually interested in completing the circle in the feedback loop, right? What do you do then? So this back and forth strengthens. You know, I can remember going to 3 different therapists, one for 2 hours on Monday, one for 2 hours on Wednesday, and one for 2 hours on Friday. And saying that some of the time there was some benefit from at least one of them in a week. But what's the tax in money, in time, and effort to get that small return? And is anyone disturbed by the incompetence of so many therapists? By the fact that none of the therapists had an intake form or a check-in form to see how they were doing or to ask how they could improve? Don't ask, don't tell is a recipe for chronic stupidity. I won't ask you what's wrong and how to improve, and you better not tell me, or I'll twist your vulnerabilities against you. The fear of every therapeutic patient. Well, my other therapist patients are doing fine. Well, maybe you need to look at this. And by the way, while I'm twisting and doing these things, sending the message that if you were a better patient, you'd be improving, I'll be weakening you further by taking your money and your time off work and your vulnerability and your trust and yielding little result. So there's an anger, there's a rage. But of course, the family system that says thou shalt not feel extends into the cult at large. The block gets bigger. Now, admittedly, some therapists will take handsome fees to passively listen to a long list of reasons and areas where they don't seem to know what they're doing based on results. A minority of therapists can take a certain amount of this. It's not as difficult to listen to someone when you know that's your job and you're being paid hundreds of dollars an hour to do so. But this is not all therapists. Many therapists cannot listen and will not. Even if they sit there taking notes, you see the intense reactions going on. You realize they're not present for you. They're present for their own defenses. And when they're all done and I ask them, well, are you going to do anything about any of this? The answer is always the same. I will hear what you have to say next week when you can pay me more money to repeat yourself, perhaps, because it's not my job to actually consider any of the things that you have to say or to necessarily have a positive impact. The impact will be whatever it will be, but regardless of whether you get better or worse, here's our fee. Well, that whole terrain is maddening. Now, the family system hiding, concealment of the wound, concealment of the desperation, concealment of the longing. Because every parent has a wound. Every parent has a longing. And I saw that in my mother, and I saw it in my father. And my goal was to get close to those feelings so that I could exist, so that we could share those feelings together. But their goal was to pretend the feelings didn't exist, was to not feel the feelings, was to distract themselves from the feelings. And so every time I came close to existing, close to getting close to the feelings, they would get out a belt or pull my ear or send me to my room or give me a lecture or ignore me and hum a little tune as if I didn't exist. So there was no way in. Both of them hit the wall again and again and again and again. I tried to get in and was punished for my efforts. I tried desperately to be seen any way I could possibly be seen when I discovered I didn't exist. Well, it turned out that both Mom and Dad had a picture, had an image in their mind of what a boy was supposed to be. I didn't exist, but the image of what a boy was supposed to be did exist. Now, it turned out that this was a rascal, was one of the words. A naughty boy was another of the words. A fool, another of the words. An entertainer, another of the words. Who did boy-like activities, who didn't really have any feelings, but who entertained Mom and Dad with those, some mixture of those, and was preferably a bit dumb. So one of the best avenues to connect was to be such a stupid, naughty boy that I would get caught deliberately. And this would make them feel very comfortable. So I would get to exist. Now, the only trouble with this flow point was it didn't take me to beauty, truth, and goodness. In other words, in order for me to exist, I had to wildly diverge from beauty, truth, and goodness, because the stereotype that they were interested in or willing to entertain as a reality was less true, less beautiful, less good than who I was, than my empathy, than my interest in their feelings. And so it became a choice. Be traumatically punished and head for beauty, truth, and goodness, or exist and be someone that I couldn't respect, that I couldn't admire, that I didn't want to be. Exist as an idiot or be punished for my goodness. So this same tension moved into school. After being raged at by yet one more teacher, after seeing the fear in another grown-up's eyes, seeing the anger in another grown-up's eyes, because I was getting too close to things they felt deeply about, I decided to be a clown. And that was just fine. That was welcome. Now I wasn't raged at. I didn't frighten the grown-ups. I entertained them at school and I entertained them at home. Now, what to do with the tremendous fear, the tremendous hostility the tremendous envy, tremendous frustration from all of this, the helplessness of being hurt by my parents. Well, no path to beauty, truth, and goodness here, but I became a bully, doing to my siblings the same bullying tactics that my parents did to me. And I felt ashamed of becoming a bully. I feel ashamed. I feel sadness that who I was taken away from me. And the fool, and the clown, and the bully, a synthetic changeling, was put in my place, because that was allowed within the power system. I lost everything: innocence, trust, that sense of hope. The ability to truly connect with another human being. And what I was given was a fool, a clown, and a bully that I didn't like, didn't respect, and was ashamed of. I was given the shame of my cult. But shame was not allowed to be talked about any more than anything else. Anger was not allowed to be talked about. Hurt was not allowed to be talked about. Grief was not allowed, so when my teacher, who I had somewhat of an emotional connection with in third grade, died, I just shut down. Nobody teaches a young man to grieve in an emotionally illiterate cult. But they rewarded shutting down, and so I shut down emotionally. Already life is hell. It's not beautiful. It's not true. It's lie upon lie upon lie upon lie, passed down through generations. It's a family system of dissociation from humanity, beauty, truth, and goodness, dissociation from God, Goddess, all that is, in favor of the cult that is the changeling, that is a measly synthetic substitute, that just looking at it fills me with grief, in a cult that has no room for the tears. What happens to those tears that have never been allowed to cry? I don't know. I feel tired and depressed and frightened, because these feelings have frightened almost every grown-up that I've known. Because no one is willing to hold the traumatized child inside with tenderness. I don't know what happens. I just know I don't have a template for the many tears that are in my body. I have exhaustion from burying them.